If you're looking for a Leica Q2 alternative, you're in the right place. Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Thomas Love here from Leica Italia, and today we are discussing a Leica Q2 alternative, because despite now Leica Q2s can be found at around $4,000, give or take, with some new offers or with some used market, so it's really a catch. I know that maybe some of you are willing to find alternatives, because of course that is an old project, and so in the last few years technology progressed so much that we saw new cameras coming out that are far superior, as we're talking about the camera body and the functionalities of the camera itself, while the glass is still the top notch, because the 28mm Summilux can be hard to challenge and to beat, even with G Master glasses, with Sony, with Canon RF glasses. There are many other glasses out there, but it's very difficult to par the Summilux 28 that it is on the Leica Q2. I know that some of you might say maybe the Leica Q3 is a bad alternative because it's more recent, it has more technology, but for this episode we're gonna compare the Leica Q2 with my new Sony A7C Mark II, because they are more or less the same size, more or less comparable in terms of use. In use, I'm always talking about EDC, everyday carry, so when you're going around with your camera hanging out from your neck, because you never know when inspiration catches you and then you want to have your camera at hand. So that means that it cannot be too big, because otherwise it would be big and bulky to take care of, and it's changing the way you are walking, you're exploring the neighborhoods or a new city or traveling. And then it needs to be long lasting for the battery, it needs to be reliable. So let's start this comparison talking about the body and dimensions. Body and dimensions are very comparable. Now the Sony is a bit smaller, this is a new generation, and this small you will only find the Lumix S9, but the Lumix S9 doesn't have an EVF, so when you're under direct strong sun, well, you will miss it. So this is why I picked up the Sony, and let's say the dimensions are comparable. The Sony is a bit smaller in terms of width and height, but it's a bit thicker, so the kind of use is the same. Now, since these cameras are so compact and lightweight, for those of you who have big hands, like this is the case for me, well, you will miss an additional grip, especially for the Leica. The assembly on the Leica is perfect, the materials are very long lasting, but it doesn't have any grip, while the Sony has this grip protruding because it has to host the new battery. And so what I did to solve this issue, it was that I got myself a JJC grip, which is very cheap and lightweight and still has the openings to take out the battery and the SD card from underneath. And so it also has the Swiss Arca mount included, which is so very useful when you're using it with a tripod, because you have to record yourself or because you want to take long exposure shot. So the grip for the Leica is this, my recommendation is this JJC, which is very cheap and it has a good grip and the Arca mount. While for the Sony, I was so lucky that I found included in the box, because I purchased this used, so my friend who sold me the camera sent over also the additional Sony grip, which is included in the box if you purchase the A7C-R. While for the A7C2, it's an additional accessory, so I found it, and with this one, I will show it in a while, you can still open it, flip it up, so you don't have to dismount it if you want to change battery or recharge the battery. And finally, I have some place to host my pinky. So with these two grips, either the JJC on the Leica or this Sony on the Sony, you are ready to go, even if you want to have your camera strapped around your wrist. So basically you're walking around holding your camera with the strap around the wrist and you're holding the camera with your hand. You're ready to go. You can go for hours because these are very compact and lightweight. Now that we talked about the grip, we can talk about the inner aspects of the camera. First of all, it's the stable. In the Leica, you only have optical image stabilization in the glass, while with the Sony you will have in-body image stabilization inside the camera body, which of course is more effective. Now, if you intend to use the camera for photos, it doesn't change because the optical stable from Leica can help you going down as low as 1/60th of a second, which is fairly low if you're taking photos, especially overnight, while with the IBIS from the Sony, you're good to go even with videos. And so you have this in-body image stabilization plus the technology active stable. Even if you want to vlog and walk while vlogging, you're good to go even for video. And then another aspect that we have to tackle is that the Sony has this flip out screen that helps you if you want to film or to shoot at yourself, while the Leica does not. And so I was using the Leica app as an external monitor when I was not looking into the display. So different kind of use, but the end result doesn't really change. Then the stable, we said the IBIS is far superior. Of course, if you want to compare with more recent cameras, I think it's comparable to Lumix. Lumix S5 Mark II X that I was using has a very good stable, and this Sony one is matching it. But the Leica, of course, Leica, its strength is about photography. So no video, no stable, sorry for that. And then if you want to talk about the resolution, of course, 33 megapixel in the Sony are more than enough if you want to crop in post and change your framing, while with the 45 megapixel from the Leica, you can eventually zoom in. So that's a great advantage that you will have with the Leica, because it only has this 28mm glass, but with 45 megapixel, you can zoom in, eventually even in camera with the rear button, so you will be able to use 35mm, 50mm, even 75 is included in the camera menu, but 75 will give you only a 6 megapixel end result, so I was never using that. And Leica would not reframe when you are changing focal length in camera, only if you're recording video, so you don't really know where your focus point is that, because if you reframe at 50mm and you are not seeing really that distance, if your subject is in focus, you have to rely on the autofocus, which is not so reliable because it's still based on a contrast. And so autofocus capabilities, also this is a good win for the Sony. As you can see, there are some pluses and minuses of each camera according to what you are shooting most often, like photos or videos, and if you're using it for street or for portraits or for any kind of use, you might have the chance to have clear in your mind whether you want to go with the Leica or with the Sony. But as a general camera, I have to say interchangeable glasses are more flexible. And so here I am still using, to compare, to have a fair comparison of the two cameras, I'm using a 28mm f2 on my Sony. But if you want to have a portrait shooting, you can eventually mount an 85mm, 105mm. And so you can eventually mount a zoom range glass on this Sony. Despite being so small, the camera body, it will not be so balanced. Now, with the 28mm, you can still put the camera on the table and have it standing, meaning it's not front facing. So this is super useful, especially if you want to use it with a gimbal, because it's compact and lightweight and you just balance it once and you're good to go. While if you're using the gimbal with the Leica, I gave it a try. For video, the Leica is better placed on a tripod, so you want to move it, because the AF, which is based on contrast, it's not so reliable. They introduced face recognition, but then it's a bit jerky when you move up and forward or backward, because it struggles to find a place where to focus on. And so the video will not be so fluid, while if you leave it on a stand, on a tripod, and use it as a cinema camera with kind of transitions, if you want to do slow panning and so on and so forth, you cannot zoom, but you have to leave the camera stable in there. Then the dynamic range, I have to say, with Sony is far superior. So with Leica, I was used to reason on luminance. I'm a big fan of black and white shooting, especially with Leica. I love the Leica color silence, And I love Leica color silence in black and white, because you cannot shoot black and white raw with a Q2 unless you get a Q2 monochrome, but that's a different ballpark. While if you convert into black and white and you start reasoning on luminance, you will see black and white in the rear display, and it helps you a lot composing, because it's a switch you have to have in your mind. We discussed it many times. If you missed that episode, please find it up here. While with the Sony, I was so impressed shooting with Bayer color, because the dynamic range is so much that at the very beginning I was a bit disappointed by the end result I was having from the Sony. But then when you go back home, you see that you can push the sliders oh so much, because you have this impressive dynamic range, and so it's harder to clip the highlights and you can recover the shadows oh so well. Low light capabilities. Now this is an easy win for Sony, because with 33 megapixels the pixels are a bit bigger compared to the 45 megapixel in the Leica, so they gather more luminance. And then you also have the Stab, and then since it's a more recent project, it manages high ISO much better than the Leica. I have to say, Leica, I have to admit that the Leica, this is a bit of a flaw of this project if you want to shoot in low light situations and conditions overnight, unless you have a tripod. But if you want to have dynamic shots or creative shots in low light, forget about it, unless you are really experienced. I have to say, I gave it a try, I had much fun downtown Vancouver, but with the Sony you are better off if you're not so experienced, if you are traveling and if you don't know your surroundings and the city and the sources of light that you can use within your shot to have a fair exposure, you're better off with a Sony. Glasses. Now this is very easy, because the Leica has a fixed glass, which is a beautiful 28mm Summilux, while with the Sony you can choose basically from a huge amount of Sony E-mount glasses and the third-party glasses as well, according to your budget. Now, if you compare the price, the Sony is far cheaper, but if you want comparable quality glasses, well, it's not so cheap anymore, because you ended up purchasing Sony G Master glasses that, in addition to the price for the Sony body, well, they almost match the price of the Leica Q2. But now let's see together a few comparisons of shots taken with the Leica and with the Sony, so that you will see by yourself which one is more aligned with your inner sensation and which one gives you more emotion. This is always a matter of emotion. So now let's see together a few examples so you can judge by yourself which one is better for you. We know color science and appreciation is such a personal thing that I might do some post-production in a way that I like it, but it might not please you. So I will share with you a few examples here and there of the photos. I want to show you how much you can push the Sony with the regular post-production, and how much if you want to push even farther, and how much you can recover the shadows and the highlights, and how good is the Leica in black and white conditions. So with that, I hope you got some value out of this video. If you did, please remember to like it, share it on social media, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any videos to come. And I guess I will see you later. Thank you, bye bye, and keep enjoying your long summer.